As residents, I believe the people understand the importance of the right to vote. It was a right which was fought for in 1790 when the district was formed. It was not until 1961, over 170 years later, that we could vote for a president of the United States.
May I ask you, Bishop Jackson, how many times in the last 10 years you've cast a vote in an election in the District of Columbia?
We'll begin with you, Bishop Jackson. Good afternoon.
Wonderful. Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Mendelson, and the rest of the council for this opportunity to testify today. My name is Harry R. Jackson, Jr., as you know. I'm a pastor, and I also lead something called Stand for Marriage D.C. I firmly believe that this legislation is going in the wrong direction. And we sit here today in our nation's capital, the center of democracy for the world. And yet, we're faced with a very real possibility that this council will deny the people the right to voice their opinion on the largest public policy issue of our time, the definition of marriage. As residents, I believe the people understand the importance of the right to vote. It was a right which was fought for in 1790 when the district was formed. It was not until 1961, over 170 years later, that we could vote for a president of the United States. And then we voted first in 1964 for President Johnson. In 1968, we were finally given a right to vote for a Board of Education. In 1970, we were privileged to elect our first delegate to the United States House of Representatives. In 1973, for the first time, we could vote for a mayor and city council of our own. In 1978, we were given the power to approve and make laws on the basis of a referendum and initiative process. So I believe that the city council's job is to safeguard the rights of the people and their right to vote. When you change marriage, you change the family. Change the family, you then change parenting. You change parenting, it affects education. Heather has two mommies, is taught as a 5-year-old to a 5-year-old in places where some parents don't think that information should be put out quite that soon. So there are far-reaching ramifications that we think are very, very consequential. So I believe you should empower the citizens. And I believe that my opponents ultimately are correct, that the initiative is about civil rights. It is about the most basic and fundamental civil right of all, the right to vote. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. wrote from the Birmingham jail, "A law is unjust if it is inflicted on a people that, as a result of being denied the right to vote, have no part in enacting or devising the law." I believe the people of the District of Columbia have suffered an injustice by being ignored already, and you're about to do that again. 1,200 ministers have signed on with us in Maryland, Virginia, and D.C. who have people that live, work, or worship in the District of Columbia. What you do will have far-reaching consequences, and I would say there is an advisory referendum you could endorse. Why don't you do it? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bishop Jackson. Ms. Mills. Councilmember Catania, any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Bishop Jackson, I want to thank you for bringing our history to this chamber, the history of voting rights in the city. Bishop, are you aware of the last time an advisory referendum was placed on the ballot in the district that attempted to diminish the rights of a minority?
I am not, sir.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chairman, if I could, I'd like to put on the record, and I respect that decision, I'd like to put on the record, Mr. Chairman, the only other time in our city's history that a, quote, advisory referendum was placed on a ballot that involved the rights of a particular community. And that ballot occurred on December 21st, 1865. December 21st, 1865. Now that advisory referendum was placed there because Mayor Wallach at the time was fearing what the radical Republicans wanted to do in Congress, which is to extend the right to vote to freed African American males in the city. And so that referendum was held, Mr. Chairman, and that vote included, because many of the radicals boycotted the vote, it was lopsided, but the vote was, in Georgetown, 712 to 1 against extending the franchise to freed African American males, and in the rest of the city it was 6,591 to 35. So as you can tell, there is an opportunity from time to time to have tyranny at a ballot box that would take away the rights of some because the majority thinks differently. We have, I think, a great covenant that has too often been broken in this country, where we put up the rights of individuals to a ballot, and then we demonize the group and use fear and sometimes hate to inspire a community reaction. And that has happened in our history through fair housing. It's happened through anti-integration measures. It's happened in nativist tendencies to have English only, one after another after another. And that is why I reject that as a proposition, and I'm so pleased that our Home Rule Charter does not allow us to pick each other off one at a time, but nonetheless has a covenant that says on these issues, we will let the legislature weigh in. Bishop Jackson, I have one other question for you. You went through the long history of of our milestones in voting in the district.
Sure.
May I ask you, Bishop Jackson, how many times in the last 10 years you've cast a vote in an election in the District of Columbia?
None in the last 10 years. I am a recent resident of the District of Columbia.
I'm sorry. Please continue.
My family has been here for over 30 years, and my father lived here. I've been in the Maryland suburbs for most of that time, but I do represent 1,200 churches, folks who deserve a voice, and their parishioners. I'd be glad to answer any other questions you have.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Jackson. No more questions.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember.